Anybody there?
Anybody where, Frank?
Get me out of here, you animals!
Out of where, Frank?
I'm boxed in!
We all feel that way at times, Frank.
MASH's Trapper John, Wayne Rogers, today on Pop Goes the Culture. Hi, I'm David Levin, and welcome to another monumental episode of Pop Goes the Culture, featuring the fourth part of my chat with Wayne Rogers, TV's Trapper John on MASH. Today, we'll talk about how he stood in for Larry Hagman as Anthony Nelson in the I Dream of Jeannie reunion movie, and the truth about the costumes on MASH. Well, let's talk about I Dream of Jeannie for a moment.
Yes.
Because you got to play Major Anthony Nelson.
Yes.
How did that come about?
That came about because of Barbara. Barbara and I had done a play together. There I go again. I'm not going to remember the name of the play we did. We did same time next year.
Love that play.
And we did that in those big music tents in the East, you know, in Long Island and in Philadelphia and wherever. And we had a great time. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady. And we rehearsed a lot there. One night, it's an aside, but it reminded me when you talk about forgetting lines. One night, there's a piano piece I play in that. There's a piano in the hotel room. I don't remember which one of the scenes when they come back together. You know, it's a story where they meet each year and have this affair once a year. And so there's a piano there, and it was a player piano, and there was a piece that they played, and I pretended to play the piano while they, you know, the special effects, whatever it was, played the piece. So one night I play the piece and I get up and it continues to play. I'm not at the piano, but it's playing. And so I rush back and do this again. And the audience realizes, of course, and they laugh. And so I you know, once that's gone, I said, "You think this is easy? Try playing it from over there," you know. So I did, you know, I did 14 lines with the audience about the player piano, and then when the player piano stopped, you know, I then approached it like it was a snake that might bite me again. So I said, "We will start this play as soon as I get back to where I was supposed to have been before this thing went off. And if it goes off again, somebody's going to get hurt." So anyway, she and I had a great time. So she asked me after that, she said, "I'm going to do this thing about, I don't know, what was it called? Return of Jeannie? Jeannie.
I Dream of Jeannie 15 years later.
I Dream of Jeannie 15 years later, yes." So I guess they couldn't get, who was it?
Larry Hagman.
Larry Hagman. So she asked me.
Well, there's a long tradition, I guess, of magical women having two guys play their husbands. You know, if you look at Bewitched, she had two Darrens on that show.
Oh, really? I didn't realize
Dick
that.
York and Dick Sargent, too.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's right. You're right. Yeah, no, that I think they couldn't get Larry, and so that's why she called me, because we had had this previous experience, you know, which
How was that for you? Was it fun?
It was fun, you know. I mean, I think it's remarkable that Jeannie, I think, is a remarkable show, and who was it that did The Flying Nun?
Sally Field.
Sally Field, that's remarkable. I think when television does those kind of shows, which I don't understand, by the way, I absolutely do not understand. I'm bewildered in wonderment at how they talk about somebody flying, a nun flying, or Jeannie who, you know, appears and disappears and makes things appear. And the public loves that, whatever that fantasy is. I'm not good at fantasy. It's hard for me to buy into it, so, you know.
Talking horses, mothers who are cars.
Yes,
Uncles
my mother, the car,
Martians.
yes. All of that, I defies my imagination. I could never do it. And that was one of the reasons when she called me, I said, I'm kind of interested because because I don't think I'm very good at it. You know, maybe I could try it.
How'd you handle it?
I don't remember. I didn't see it. So I assume it was okay. I mean, you know, nobody's going to seriously review you for that, I don't think, you know. So
Had you ever watched the show originally?
Oh yes, I had, and I knew her, you know. So as I said, that was more important than anything else. You know, I think when you act, you go through life and you do certain things with certain directors or producers or other. You make exceptions sometimes to the material. You say, gee, I don't really want to do this, but it's my friend. He wants me to do it. If it's not embarrassing, you know, I'll do it.
Kind of like this interview, I guess. No, just kidding.
I hadn't really thought about this either, you know, but I think also you get to a point where it's easier to reflect on those things that are not so immediate, and so you're a little better prepared to. Maybe you don't remember them, but at least you're better prepared to have some objectivity in talking about them. Yeah.
There's stories that, you know, and you've told us some great stories, and it's just really funny stuff. What are some of the stories that maybe you've dined out on? You know, you go out, so you can't believe this happened on this particular day. And I know you're going to tell me you don't remember, but just pretend for the moment. Is there something that you like, you know, this is the story I've never told, or this is the story that I can't walk.
You mean about MASH or about?
About anything. MASH, great, but anything.
Well, I told you about Mickey Rooney. I'm just trying to think of all of some of the, I don't know, crazier things. You know, when you ask me like that, I don't think of them, and I probably should. But
5 minutes after you walk out of here.
Yes, I could. And under certain circumstances, if people remind me of certain things, then I will remember, you know, things that occurred on particular shows that were outrageous or that were fine. I'll tell you some. I was in a movie with Lee Marvin and Paul Newman. Did you know Lee at all? No. Well, Lee had made 15 landings in the South Pacific in World War II. You know, Lee was as a Marine. Lee was a tough guy, and I was in this movie with Lee and Paul. Stuart Rosenberg, who was a director, was a friend of mine, did Brubaker, and he did Cool Hand Luke. That's where. And Paul, I made 3 pictures with Paul and Stuart. Cool Hand Luke being one, and this picture was called Pocket Money. And I've forgotten who the writer was, but a really good writer. And there was not much story. It was mostly character study. And Paul and Lee did not get along real well. Paul, you know, was into racing cars and things like that, and Lee was Lee. Lee was inclined to hit the booze. And Stuart said to him, he said, we're going to shoot 6 days a week. And he said, I'm going to put the camera on you, Lee. So you, whether you're standing or groveling in the dirt, I'm going to shoot the scene. So just keep that in mind. Well, it was a great thing to say to Lee Marvin, because Lee stayed sober until noon on Saturday. Now, we shot all day Saturday. But by 1 o'clock on Saturday, all bets were off. He was gone. And when Lee drank, he was wild. He was funny. He was outrageous. A little scary, because he could come totally unglued, you know. And I saw him in several situations where he was unglued like that, and he was having a bad time with his then wife one night. And I was sleeping across the hall. He and Paul had rooms in this hotel next to each other, and I was across the hall. And I remember waking up, I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that, screaming and yelling and all that. And then I hear, hey, that's it, you're gone. Bang! Door slams. Then I hear this voice saying, "Oh, Lee, please let me back in, let me back in." He'd thrown his wife out of the room, locked the door. Then I hear her go and scratch on Paul's door. Paul, you gotta let me in. Leah's locked me out." Then she comes to my door. I am holding my breath so badly. I'm saying, I'm going to get in between Lee Marvin and his wife. And by the way, I have no idea what happened, because I immediately corked up my ears and I said, I'm not getting anywhere near any of this. And so the next day, Lee says to me, "Did you hear my wife last night?" I said, "I didn't hear a thing, Lee. I was dead asleep. I couldn't hear a thing." You know. But he was an interesting guy. Lee was. He marched to the sound of different drums. He'd made a lot of big pictures too, you know. Paul also, a very interesting guy. I'd done Cool Hand Luke with Paul, and you know that egg eating scene in Cool Hand Luke? Mm-hmm. The character, by the way, that I played in Cool Hand Luke was called the Gambler, and he didn't exist in the script. And Stewart called me, and whom I adore, Stewart called me and said, "I want you in the movie. I want you to improvise a character." He said, and so write some stuff in some of these places where you think, and we'll improvise that character. And I look back at that cast. I think Lou Antonio and Dennis Hopper, who didn't have a line, didn't have a word in the script, you know, and all these various people who were in that show. But Paul, when the egg eating scene came, that came out of the fact that he could actually do that. Not eat the eggs, but he could bow up his stomach like that. Paul would drink an enormous amount of beer, and he used to carry around one of these seats like this that could fold up on itself and steam, and he would steam him. And he could actually make his stomach go. They didn't have to build a phony stomach or anything like that. I was remarkable. And he actually could eat a lot of those eggs too. That was also a little dazzling. I thought, I've never heard of a stunt double as an egg eater, but I said, you know.
He did his own stunt.
Yeah, he did. Paul was remarkably good in you know, he wins the Academy Award for the most oddball thing when he was at playing pool, you know, in what was that?
Color of Money.
Yeah, but the first one,
Hustler.
The Hustler, he was really good in, and they give him the Academy Award. I think the Academy Award is sort of a, you know, who knows?
Well, you know, if you have 5 movies in a particular year that are just outstanding,
mm-hmm.
nobody stands a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have one year where they're all dogs except for one,
mm-hmm.
you know which one's going to get it. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have a year where there's 5 stinkers, some stinker is going to be up there with, you know.
Oh yeah, but it's also strange that they would choose to honor somebody. You know, you think it's almost like for other work. Because he was so much better in the first picture was so much better, and somebody up there likes me. When Paul was young, he was wonderful in that. I miscast, but wonderful, you know. So it's interesting.
All awards are like that, though.
Mm-hmm.
They're all like that.
Mm-hmm. Now his wife won one. She was terrific. 3 Faces of Eve. She was brilliant. Yeah, and she deserved it then. But you wonder, some of them. You know, didn't they give it to Liz Taylor for Butterfield 8 or something like that? I mean, you know, you think to yourself, what? But of course, you're right. Awards are like that.
They are like that.
Well, George Bernard Shaw said it best. Prizes are for children.
He said a lot of things pretty well.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And I had to act in Misalliance, and it was just awful, by the way, for the first 2 nights until I finally got it. I didn't get that one in rehearsal. It's really embarrassing when you know you're bad. I said to the director of that when I did that, I said, you know, I'm stinking up the stage. He said, yeah, you are. I said, well, you're not much help. He said, there's no helping you. Well, he was right. I couldn't be helped. I finally got it, but it took me, you know, after we had opened.
Yeah, but you made Trapper on that show look effortless. you made it look easy. I mean, I know that probably a lot of rehearsal went into making it look that easy now.
That's why they call it acting. Yes. That's the craft. Yes.
Okay. Here's the question.
As a friend of mine, I'm under contract now to the Fox Network, and I do the show on finance. And some guy called me up and he said, "Wayne, gee," he says, I know you. You don't have the vaguest idea what you're talking about on that show." I said, "That's absolutely true. That's why they call it acting." I'm acting.
It's a good part.
Yes, it's a good part.
It's a good part.
Yes.
Did you keep any memorabilia from MASH?
Memorabilia. You mean like my sweatshirt?
Souvenirs, a prop here, a costume there, something to put on eBay when you retire?
Golly, I don't think so. Scripts. I have all of the old scripts. Yes, that's what I kept. I got down to it. It's interesting you asked that about memorabilia, because MASH, we wore an Army T-shirt, khaki T-shirt, pair of pants, boots, and a jacket. That was it. And I got, after a while, I could make it from 8 minutes from my house to the set at Fox. I kept a toothbrush on the set. I didn't wear makeup. Now, I've got on makeup right now, but I didn't wear makeup then. And he wouldn't know it half the time, the cameraman. Sometimes he would catch me, but half the time he would. And I kept a toothbrush, and I brushed my teeth. I didn't ever comb my hair. My hair was curly and full then. I never combed my hair. I just brushed my teeth, get dressed in that stuff, and run down on the set.
In 8 minutes.
8 minutes, and I was there and ready. Now, Alan and I, we did a test one year. I said to him, do you think they ever wash these clothes that we wear? He said, yeah, I know they wash the shirts. I said, I do too, but do you think they ever wash the pants or the jacket we wear? He said, I don't know. I said, I tell you what let's do. At the end of the season, let's put some paper in the pockets or write ourselves notes or do something like that and see. And by God, they didn't. The same notes, the same pieces of paper were in the pockets of the pants and the coats from the season before to the next season. Can you imagine? I said, no wonder this is real. We smell bad here. That's why this is so real, Talk about method acting. Jesus, you stink, And the reason you stink is because they haven't washed your wardrobe for a year. I mean, that was true. Is that amazing?
Did you ever talk to anybody about that?
Yes, immediately when we found it the second year, we said, you guys haven't cleaned it. Oh, well, things are tough at the studio these days. I said, oh, they must be. Fox is going broke, huh? Yes. Oh, my God. Can you imagine?
They treat you like stars.
Oh, yes. Unbelievable. Well, it was. I liked that part of the show. I once said to Robert Vaughn, you remember Robert Vaughn? Robert Vaughn was uncle. I said, my idea of acting really in movies would be to be able to put on a tuxedo and sit in a chair all day and sip a martini or something and have clever dialogue. That would be fun, I think. But at house calls, we didn't dress. We just had on the white doctor's thing and a stethoscope, and that was it. And
but you got the martinis on MASH.
Yes, we did. That's true. Got the martinis on MASH. That was part of it.
Your commute was 8 minutes. Alan Alda's was a little longer than that, wasn't it?
Yes, but something else. When we went on location, Alan, of course, had to commute from New York. But when we went on location, he had a house here, bought a house here. And he and I would drive to location together. And we really got to know each other well then, because we talk about our dreams and things. I mean, real dreams. What'd you dream about last night? Well, I had this wild dream, And we really got to know each other. He's a terrific guy.
Tell me about what he did every week, though, because that's pretty amazing that he would go back to New Jersey every week.
Well, he didn't. I think in the He stopped that after a while. Yes, he used to fly back on the weekends. Yeah, I don't know whether he went every weekend or every other weekend. He may have, but I know at some point in time it began to wear on him. So he bought a place here, rented a place. In fact, I went with him and we looked at houses together. And he said, "You've lived out here. You can advise me." I said, "I don't know what you want in a house. I can tell you about the neighborhoods, and that kind of thing." So. And I think he still owns a house here. Yeah, he built a house here ultimately. He and Arlene.
Still living in New Jersey now, I guess.
Well, he lives on Long Island now. Has an apartment in the city now. No, I think they sold the house in Leonia in New Jersey. Yeah, he has a home on Long Island, one out here, and an apartment in the city. Got a beautiful apartment in the city, right near Lincoln Center. Mm-hmm.
That's it for now. Next time, the conclusion of my discussion with Wayne Rogers. He shares more of his favorite anecdotes and talks about how he became a Broadway producer. I hope you'll be there. Till then, I'm David Levin, and don't forget to subscribe to Pop Goes the Culture.